Welcome to Pursuing the Muse. I'm Tom Compton, and this week I'm thrilled to dive into the wonderful new album, Clams Casino, with the artist who created it, Brian Dunne. Brian is a singer-songwriter based in New York. He's known for combining rock and roll with raw, literate self-examination, and he is also a member of the supergroup Fantastic Cat. Stick around as Brian discusses the core conflict of his working-class characters having to choose whether to sell out or move out, how he produced the album at home, sometimes keeping the lower quality audio from the original demo to preserve the song's soul. And we'll also hear why he believes that professional songwriting discipline is like going fishing every day. So stick around. Here's Brian.
That's so much for me to ask for. In Clams Casino on a Sunday night. Is it so bad to want a good ride? We're going up to Rockland County. You and me can live like townies now. Sounds funny, but it isn't much fun. And we're back where we started. Back where we started. Back where we started from. A middle finger to the powers that linger, just to show them that I know who I used to be. I used to say that if I made it inside, I would shoot out the lights, take a couple of swings. This is nice, baby, this is alright. I'm gonna stay here forever and at least for a night. And maybe I'm not really quite what you think, I'm just a fake version of the real thing.
Tom Compton here again with Pursuing the Muse. I am super excited. Today we have Brian Dunne as a guest in the studio. Brian, how are you doing?
Doing great, man.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
I'm thrilled to be here, man.
All right. I gotta say, this record of yours that came out this fall, Clams Casino, is a masterpiece. I love this record. So I am extra thrilled to
Thank you, Tom. That means a lot to me.
to chat with
a labor of love.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it. Just like out of the gate, one of the things I saw was like your last record, Loser on the Ropes. Like this is kind of a handing of the baton. Like that was a fight in the ring, and then this is kind of in the aftermath. Is that
There was the aftermath for sure.
So you've got a cast of characters in this record. Is the theme just like dealing with what, I mean, all of us are undergoing right now with our country and world and stuff?
Yeah, the theme is sort of, it sort of dawned on me that I could look at all the issues, personal and public, through the lens of class on this record. I was really just, I wanted to do just kind of a deep dive into where you come from and where you're trying to go. And if what holds you back from getting there is what you were born into, and who gets to win and who gets to lose, or who has to lose and who gets to stay and who has to go. And I really liked that specific lens, especially because in this complicated time, it's not a left to right vision. It's an up to down sort of way of looking at things, though there's a lot of political undertones to the record. But I just sort of like retraced my footsteps through my own working class roots and through the sort of characters that I wanted to talk about, because that's really where I was at in my life. I was in my early 30s, and I was thinking about, I'd lived in New York City for about 14 years, and I had been following all these different characters through their lives. And then I was starting to see that, like, at a certain point, push does come to shove, and where you land has a lot to do with where you began, and there was this moment in my mid-20s where everybody seemed to be cosplaying, whether you were or you weren't, this sort of like, hard-worn troubadour. Everybody seemed to be drinking a $3 beer and had a used beanie on. And some of those people were authentic, and some of them were liars.
Yeah, you could only like keep the facade up for so long.
Yeah, and it just became interesting to me, sort of what what the implications of that were and what is the aftermath of that,
Right. And how many, like, is there every song on the record, is it a different character, or are there characters embodied that are coming back through different tracks?
There are some there is some connective tissue, and I sort of treat the characters as a bit of a grab bag. But there tends to be, there's really two main characters, which is the person who has achieved what they wanted to and is now confronted with the idea that they may have to sell out a little bit, and the person who did not achieve what they wanted to and has to move out.
Gotcha.
So it's sort of that double-edged sword. Do you sell out or do you move out? And if you want to stay in the middle, how do you?
Right. It seems like there are a couple of tracks like Rockland County and what's the one where the character's going back to Ohio?
Yeah, I watched the light. Those are the moving out characters. Those are my going home with your tail tucked between your legs. And actually one was written as a response to the other one. I wanted to show that both sides of I started with this, I watched the light, and that was a song about, I really liked the idea that, a dream doesn't always just die overnight in this sort of like plane crash cataclysm of a seismic event. It just withers away over time until one day you wake up and it's unrecognizable and you go, well, then why am I living in a studio apartment? And so I sort of wrote that song, but then I wanted to write the other side of that story, which is the sweet relief of letting something go, the sort of, cathartic sigh you get when you give up on something, and I wanted to just show this sort of duality of that, because that's just where people were at that I had come up with.
Right. Rockland County seems to be more at peace.
Yeah, although there's a tongue-in-cheek element to that song, where I'm singing about things joyously, but I'm not necessarily saying that it will last, as I say in the song. Sounds funny, but it isn't much fun. So this might just be a momentary reprieve.
Well, at least it could be worse.
That it could always be worse. That's the truth.
So I saw you play at Beat Kitchen here in Chicago not too long ago.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks for being there, man.
Yes, it was it was a testament to the songs being so good that it shines in a solo acoustic setting, because that can't be pulled off unless the songs are solid to begin with. So kudos to you for delivering the goods that could be represented. And it was really a treat to hear them differently than the record, the way you did it that night.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, that was a concern of mine when we were getting ready to do the tour. I was just kind of, I wasn't sure if the songs were going to be able to like stand up solo. And so I started the show, the first show of the tour, and I did 4 or 5 of the tunes, and slowly I started getting requests for more and more until I think that by the time we got to Chicago, I did 9 of the 10 tracks or something like that. It's a really beautiful thing. That's really what you want from an album, to be able to take those songs out and find a space for all of them in the set, And yeah, I didn't know that they were going to work, so I was actually pretty worried about it. And actually turned out I was warmly surprised.
Nice. And then since it went over so well, are you thinking of doing more of that with 2026?
Yeah, I think there will be a solo tour. My band, Fantastic Cat, we're about to announce a new record, and so I'll be out with the band in the summertime. But I think there's going to be a winter spring tour that's in the works that'll be solo. I really love doing that. And the last record I did a full band tour for the album, and then I was out with Fantastic Cat, and I wanted this time around to make sure that those two things felt really different. You can come see me rock with my band, and I'll play a bunch of guitar solos and jump all over the stage, and then the solo show is going to be more of an intimate sort of storytelling situation, something like that.
Nice. So talk to me about Fantastic Cat. It's known as a supergroup of sorts. How did that all come together?
Yeah, Fantastic Cat. It was is a super group of sorts. Is a good way to put it. Yeah, it was how it came together was I just got a call from my friend Anthony one day asking if I want to do this weekend project, and then it sort of took over our lives for the next 5 years. I guess that was or something. The first record didn't come out till 22 because the pandemic ran through it. But yeah, it's this band that we're now about to put out our third record, and it's a full-time operation. We got a van, we got a ton of gear. We're cooking. So it's gonna be a big year for the band, and I'm really excited about it.
So who are your bandmates in Fantastic Cat?
Yeah, so it's Anthony D'Amato, Mike Montali, Don DeLego, and myself, all New York City songwriters, all sort of solo acts that sort of came together, and now this sort of four-headed songwriting monster, you know. And the shows are super fun. We switch and swap all the instruments, so it's a really unique show. There's nothing quite like it out there, and we really love doing it. So, and people are showing up to the shows, so you know, as long as they do, we'll keep playing.
Fun. Now, do you take will you do your own songs with Fantastic Cat, or is it just the Fantastic Cat songs?
A little bit, you know. We'll usually do one of my songs called "If You Want to Stay a While" in the middle of the set, but at this point now we're coming into the third record. We're gonna have a plethora of material to pull from, so it's a little bit, you know, a little bit of everything.
Right. No shortage of tunes to select from.
Totally.
So when is Fantastic Cat hitting the road? When's the record coming out?
The record will be out in April, and the tour I think kicks off in April too. So we're gonna have we'll probably put out the first single in the wintertime, and then roll from there.
Nice. Do you have a release date for the single?
I do not. I'm not the guy to ask.
Right. Everyone's got their role, right?
Nicely.
Okay. So to get back to Clams Casino, now it seems like it was created under a different process than Loser on the Ropes, like in terms of how it was produced.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
It was interesting. I went down to Athens, Georgia to do Loser on the Ropes and worked with Drew Dannenberg and some of the guys from up Montreal. And it was a really cool experience. When I was putting together a deluxe version of that record, I was going through and I was thinking about how I was listening to the demos. I was going through all the stuff, just to see if there was anything in there. And I started to feel like the demos, for all their warts and their, sort of lo-fi audio, they had a certain swagger to them that I wanted to sort of explore more, because there is something to the very first time you sing a song, and you're not sure what it is, and maybe you're mumbling some of the lyrics, so you don't have it all worked out. But it's the first time you're singing that song, and so your intention has never been more pure. And I sort of came up with this process this time where I was like, if I when I'm demoing everything, if I record it to a click, I can go through and I can replace things in a more professional way. But if at any point I feel that it loses some of its soul, I just go back and we'll just take the lower quality audio. And, because of that, I have some songs that, I think the song Some Room Left on the album is the very first vocal. You can hear me turning the pages in my notebook, and so I had it's a much more authentic experience, more truer to those like vintage albums that we loved, when a band would post up at the record plant for 8 months, and you'd hear them working through stuff for the very first time, all of the White Album, or Darkest on the Edge of Town. And I just wanted a piece of that, so I produced it myself mostly in my home studio, and then I visited some more professional recording setups, and I replaced things that were a little too chintzy or a little too cheap sounding, and what I got was a really cool balance.
Nice. Are there any examples of things that you tried in a studio and then you didn't feel it had the excitement of the demo, then you took it out?
Totally. There's tons of stuff. I re-recorded a bunch of bass tracks that I didn't wind up using. Like I said, the vocal on Some Room Left, I did that on a really fancy mic and then still decided to go with the original vocal. I did a bunch of the vocals on this record are the original things. I think there's even hand claps that are just from the laptop mic. You know, it's a real balance of this and that, and that's what I like about it. But I recorded everything. And,
Right. Oh, okay.
or at least I consulted it. There were a few things we pulled up and I went and we listened to it on studio speakers and we all couldn't tell that it wasn't recorded at a professional studio. So, you know,
There you go.
there you go.
Can't ask for more than that.
Exactly.
So, who were your ears helping you with making these judgments?
Well, I sent everything to my best friend, Ken Yates, who's a great songwriter.
Oh yeah, I love Ken.
Yeah, Ken's my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding, and I send everything I work on to Ken, from the demo stage to the final mixes and masters. And then I recorded. I programmed all the drums, and then I replaced them with real drums. So I had an old school pal of mine named Dan Rohan come down to a studio called Greylock here in Brooklyn, and the engineer at that studio, the engineer and owner named Ben Tali, who's also an old school pal of mine, we sort of sat and listened to everything. And then the last step is I went to my Fantastic Cat bandmate Don's house and we pulled everything up and just listened through everything. And I did record some guitar out there for the song Clams Casino and the guitar solo for Living It Backwards. But we just sort of, most of the experience was listening to things and deciding if it was good enough to mix or we should toy with something or try something, you know?
Cool. Are you comfortable on all instruments yourself, or are there some things you just like said, I'm going to leave that to somebody else?
There are a few things here and there. There's an organ track on Living It Backwards that's played by my good friend Alex, right? All the drums I programmed, but I don't have the physicality for that. There's a couple of things that I played on there, but basically everything else, the guitar, piano, keys, background vocals, any sort of percussion, hand claps, tambourine, like things like that. That's all me. So I would say I played like 90% of the instruments on the record.
Gotcha. Are you comfortable enough to play drums with Fantastic Cat, I'm sure?
Yeah. I play drums on a few songs. I'm certainly the worst drummer in the band, but we still do it anyways.
Keeps it real.
Keeps it real.
And then maybe you appreciate the other drummers a little more.
I don't, but yeah.
There you go. All right, excellent. So how big is your studio at your home?
Well, I'll use my studio is a pretty humble, small space, but when I'm making a record, I'll kind of the whole house is the studio. You know, everything gets moved out into the living room or the bedroom or the kitchen, depending on if I like the sound. I'll record in the bathroom if I like the reflectiveness. You know, so it's sort of, you know, I'll use anything.
There you go. The feng shui gets mixed up, but
exactly. When working on the demos, I'll just tuck myself in this little it's right behind me actually through this wall. Just a tiny little 100 square foot, you know, box essentially. Like essentially a glorified closet with a chair in it. But you know, intention is everything, so.
Right. Is there like a comfort to your home studio that you don't get in a professional studio?
No, I love being in a professional studio. The comfort is that there's any amount of time. You know, that's the comfort, really, is that working with other people in a physical space has limitations. I can, a home studio, the only difference to me is just if I'm struck by something at 1:30 in the morning, I just roll out of bed and into the studio room, or, I can take my little keyboard and throw my headphones on the couch, like it's kind of just like a, what I like about it is my initial idea of music creation is very much alive and well in this type of setup where, I used to listen to, an album like Double Fantasy, and I would just think of John Lennon, just sort of in his house looking out over Central Park at the Dakota and thinking about, the world, watching the wheels, and obviously we know it can be a lot different than that, especially in this like sort of, modern age where everybody's getting together and there's these business deals before the songs are even written and there's 9 writers. This is very much what you are hearing on my record is the sound of a New York musician in New York City tinkering with his toys in New York City, and that's sort of the album I wanted to make. And that's probably what I'm going to do again, building on that, because I had so much fun doing it, and the reception to it was so much stronger than anything else that I'd done, that I kind of feel like, okay, I think we found something, which is me in the factory, me just sort of, out in the woodshed working on, using the tools at hand to paint, these pictures.
Right. Yeah, I would agree that the experiment definitely worked, because there's such life to this record that I would definitely encourage repeating the process.
Oh, thanks, Tom.
Yeah. So talk to me about Clams Casino. When I first saw the song title and heard the song, I was like, is this a casino in Reno, Nevada? Is this an under the radar casino in Reno or Atlantic City or something? But it turns out it's not a real place, is it?
No, it's a dish. It's a menu item. Clams Casino is like is a baked clam of sorts. But I like the idea because I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in New York, and it's like sort of a bygone dish that you would see at like a red sauce Italian restaurant. But as a kid, I would see it on the menu, and I always think it was so like cosmopolitan and fancy that I sort of had this idea of it in that, like, when I grow up and I strike it rich, man, I'm gonna, swim in a bathtub full of Clams Casino. So I just kind of liked this that vernacular surrounding it, especially because it was something that had sort of been deleted from culture at large. This sort of passe way of talking about the working class. And that was sort of what I was trying to get at with the record, was not just about class today, but about class the way I remember it when I was first made aware of it versus how it feels today. Sort of the expectation versus the reality. Like my dad worked in a factory when I was a kid, and my life was just sort of the idea that I have of it in, say, like 1994, when I was about 5 years old, has this working class look to it, and in the way I picture it in my head. And I wanted to sort of capture that image before it fully disappeared, because I feel like the working class, the middle class, is disappearing, and especially in New York City, which is becoming more and more bourgeois by the day, more and more rich and fanciful. Like, I believe in working class music, and I believe in those people and their pride. But then I wanted to go even further in it and go, well, what does that say about me if I'm constantly pushing for success, right? Like, I'm a very ambitious, driven, I make, songs for a living, which is inherently like, lush. It's like anyone in my family, if I tried to tell my grandfather like what I did, he would be like, that's what you do, like that kind of thing. So I just sort of, kind of a deep dive on class pride, class shame, where we're coming from and where we're headed. And so Clams Casino felt like the perfect center of all that.
Right. You may bring it back as a menu dish.
I made it for everybody like the week before the album came out, and it was excellent.
Are you actually eating Clams Casino on the album cover? Because you're in a restaurant there.
No, I was specifically not eating Clams Casino by design. I was thinking about how the Black Keys have that record El Camino, but there's no El Camino on the cover. I just thought it would have been a little too on the nose. So I went with the sort of general red sauce aesthetic, just the classic spaghetti pomodoro on the cover, because it felt that it would be too much.
There you go. And the deadpan look on the cover kind of says, I don't have Clams Casino.
Oh, it's a desire.
One day.
To be achieved. Maybe on the last record, I'll put it on the cover.
There you go. Now, are you actually from Rockland County?
No, I'm from Orange County.
Okay.
But I felt that Orange County is the next county up. I felt that Orange County had too many Californian connotations. So I switched it over to Rockland County, which is, my dad was born on 18th Street, but then when he was like 10 years old, they moved up to Pearl River, which is like an Irish town in Rockland County. Orange and Rockland are kind of one in the same electric company. And I borrowed from the next county over.
Okay. And they have a super target, I assume.
They got them. They got them all across both. Both counties.
You need it, they got it.
Exactly.
Excellent. So I heard you say live that people think you sing like Michael Bolton.
Oh, the Michael Bolton bit. Yeah, I was just chewing on that.
Now, I'm going to say, that's not my assessment, but like on a song like Fake Version of the Real Thing, I hear more of a Roger McGuinn from like Mansion on the Hill.
Sure, yeah, man. Like I love McGuinn, and yeah, definitely his double track vocals. I'm probably more borrowing from him, you know. But yeah, no, the Byrds were a huge influence in my house when I was a kid. My dad, his record collection, he was a little older for a dad of my generation, so he was a Vietnam vet, so his record collection was very, 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 very dug in that sort of like 67 to 69. So it was a lot of Animals, a lot of Creedence, obviously, and a lot of Byrds, and that was sort of like, you know, that, and you know, later Beatles, no early Beatles, everything, you know, Dylan specifically from, you know, Times They Are Changing through Desire, and then Hard Cut Off, like that kind of, I don't know how to even explain it, but yeah, so very much that particular era where, you know, there's a little psychedelia, and then there's also like roots Americana, and obviously the Byrds sit at the center of that because they're both things.
They were pioneers in that. Is it the double tracking that makes the warble that is, or the vibrato effect that McGuinn and I'm hearing on you get there?
Depends. I mean, it depends on which, like, yeah, that's a double tracking on that song, but sometimes McGuinn and those guys would, like, you know, go through a Leslie speaker or something like that. If I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but yeah, and on that song, it's just a double track vocal.
Okay. So have you always wanted to be a singer-songwriter, or did you have a career before starting in music?
No, I've only ever wanted to be a singer-songwriter. I did it, you know, a stint as other people's guitar players when I first moved to New York, and I kind of couldn't get arrested. But no, I've only ever wanted to be a singer-songwriter. The only job I ever held was that I worked at the guitar store in my hometown. So it's barely a stretch.
There you go. And that's almost required.
Yeah, I worked at Van Gelder Music Center, 562 Route 17M.
Now, who are your influences on guitar? Just kind of curious on the instrument side.
As a player, I think a lot about Mike Campbell. Probably my main influence, because I think of Mike Campbell as the ultimate songwriter's guitar player, and just the way that he served those Petty songs and also wrote so many of them himself. Just how lyrical he could be, but still razzle dazzle, you know, because it's a balance, right? Like Robbie Robertson is a massive influence on me, but Robbie's a little less on the razzle dazzle side and more on the, like, I love Robbie's restraint, you know, and his unwillingness to be a guitar gunslinger at a time where guitar gunslingers were, you know, prevalent, and you know, he exercised restraint. So those are my two biggest influences on the guitar. And then, you know, sonically, tone-wise, how can you not love Knopfler? And I love this sort of berserk, garagey playing of Neil Young. I think that Neil has so much character to his guitar playing, and I'd rather listen to like Neil Young take a guitar solo than like Eric Johnson. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot about the guitar because I have a pretty heavy technical ability, but I'm well aware of that too much showy guitar is not what I want to bring to the table. I want succinct, excellent guitar solos where the intention is above the actual notes that are being played, right? There's only one guitar solo on Clams Casino. There's going to be a ton on the Fantastic Cat record. But I think about I'm more influenced by the sort of production element of guitar. Like, how can I use this instrument to further the story. And that's what I think Mike Campbell does, right? When you hear maybe my favorite guitar solo of all time is It's Good to Be King.
Mm.
I just think he just, it's just so, it's just the perfect guitar solo for it. Also, shout out to David Lindley. I also feel strongly about Lindley. I know Lindley's a lap steel player, but just the way that he always served the song first, and those solos they're part of the songwriting. It's not just ripping for ripping's sake,
Absolutely. Yeah, that was the phrase going through my head, is in service to the song.
Yeah.
And as a songwriter, that's kind of got to be your overarching consciousness there.
Totally. And listen, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've done the deep studies on all the guys, Hendrix and Clapton, and on down to like, Schofield and Mike Stern and that kind of stuff. And then also just like, Tommy Emmanuel or things where you're just sort of marveling at technical ability. I go for that too. But just, and obviously I love Blake Mills, and Blake's like a fucking total genius. But just what, at some point you have to make a decision what your lot in life is going to be on the guitar, and I decided early on that I didn't want to ever play a note that wasn't necessary.
Nice. Did you go to school for guitar or take lessons or even just songwriting? Did you go after a music degree?
Yeah, I mean, I took lessons as a kid, and then I taught lessons at the guitar shop, and then I went to Berkeley, and sort of, continue to develop my skills there.
Okay. And then is it one of those things where you learn the rules and then throw them all out the window and go with your gut?
Totally, man. That's exactly what it is. And there's a lot of value in having things. The truth about a career in music is that music is one of the more listless things you could ever do, right? Because people clap just when the song's over. Yeah, and you'll never really know if they liked it. And it was really useful in those early years to have feedback, because there's so little feedback. People will review the record if they like it, but generally speaking, if you're a relatively small artist, they're not going to destroy you. So you'll never know. Your record could suck, and you would never ever know. Because it would just be met with silence, and it was really great during those formative years of my life to have some people I'm super grateful for. Some of them were my peers, and some of them were teachers, and some of them were just people with that were brutally honest, give me their honest opinion of what I was doing so I could dial it in. It can be tough medicine, but it was really, really good for me to hear what I needed to improve upon.
Yeah, I could appreciate that, man. You can get crickets. So let me at least say that Clams Casino is wonderful. So if nothing else you take away, your new work is absolutely spectacular.
Well, thanks, man. I'm super, super proud of it. I'm excited to keep it going into the new year. We've got some cool things coming out this month, just in terms of some press I've been doing, and there's gonna be some articles, and I did a fun little feature for Pitchfork, and I'd like to keep expanding on this sort of universe. I'm working on some new material right now, so I'm working on it all day.
How do you capture song ideas? Do you use like a memo app on your phone or something like that?
I'll get it down whichever way I can. I'm not romantic about that. I'm still a hand writer. I write everything in a notebook. Just because I've come to like the way it feels. I'll throw it into a notes app or whatever, voice memo. Mm-hmm. Or I'll just fire up the recording equipment and just start, making some noise in there. One thing I'm not precious about is process. The only thing I'm precious about with my process is that process should involve you getting your ass in that chair and getting something down on a piece of paper. Otherwise, I'll write in a hotel. I'll write at home. I'll write outside. I'll write inside. I'll do whatever.
Gotcha. Do you feel, are you able to just sit down and force yourself to write, or do you need inspiration to strike?
No, it's like going fishing. You know, most days you don't catch anything, but the more you sink your line in, the more you'll dial it in. And you know, I find that while it's great if you're inspired, you know, I've written some terrible songs while I was inspired. I've written some good stuff while I thought was a piece of shit, and I was just like super not into it, and I sent it to somebody else. And they said, you know, this is really good, man. And I went, oh, let me listen to that again. You know,
Nice.
so to me, it's like you just go fishing every day. You catch what you catch. Some days it's, you know, nothing. Some days it's something, but nothing special. And then when you do get that, you know, fish on the line, you've got your skills pretty dialed in because you've been reeling them in all week, you know. So I've always been a volume guy. I believe in writing in volume. It helps with the stress of it, so you're not being too precious, you know. Take it. If it's not good, no big deal. We'll get them tomorrow.
Right. So
And-
you were saying Loser on the Ropes. It was coming out of making a deluxe edition that kind of birthed Clams Casino.
Yeah, I ended up using you can go online and hear that there's like a early version of Optimist and an early version of the title track that I ended up using. And with those two songs specifically, with that version of Optimist, I did feel like I was like, oh yeah, this is what I was going for originally, you know. And I thought, oh, that's it. Maybe I ought to be preserving that more, you know.
So did you ever put out that deluxe edition, or did it strictly become Clams Casino?
No, yeah, it's out. It's out. It was more the idea that the demos for that record had validity to them, even after I had mixed, mastered, recorded, you know, spent a small fortune on Loser on the Ropes. I wouldn't say the demos were better. They were just different. They were interesting.
Gotcha.
And it felt like a compelling way forward.
Were there tracks that didn't make Clams Casino?
Yeah, there always are. There are always things that don't. I obviously have the outlet of the band now. So as I was writing, I was also putting things aside for the band that felt like they suited the band more. So there's lots of new music that's sitting on the table that's ready to come out. And there's lots of new music that's going to be written because I like to write and I like to play.
Sure. Did you find that having was there a point where you like were explicitly saying, I'm making the next record and I've got this handful of songs, or did it more evolve over time because you have the luxury of your home studio where it got to a point where you had a lot of songs and this could be a record?
No, it's, you know, I know I'm always going to be making a record. I love the medium. I think that like 40 minutes is a perfect amount of time to hang out with an artist. And I love the medium of record. You know, I'm never writing for singles. I'm always sort of writing, you know, at first like right now I'm just writing, you know, cause it's like a little too big to think about. The second you get like 3 or 4 of them, you start to go like, I could see, you know, start to make a list of songs and then leave the blanks. You're like, this one's probably track 2 and this one's probably track 7, you know? And then I try to get all my track 2s to be pushed to the back, and I don't know, I just like it, you know? It's like making a movie. I'm always writing for the record.
Sure. Do you have a process that you use for like sequencing albums?
No, just check in the, you know, in the timbre of my heart. I generally always know where things are going to go.
Do they have a lot? Do they have a lot of movement like over time? Like,
yeah, for sure. Originally there was a song called Gracie Mansion that was gonna kick off the record, and then I wrote Clams Casino, and I thought, well, I think that has to be track 1. You know, like, yeah, it's you're trying to beat what you got. You know, you're sort of setting it up, and you know, try to move it on down.
Sure. As a Chicagoan, I had to Google what Gracie's Mansion was. So
Gracie Mansion, yeah. It's where the mayor lives.
Right. I don't even know if there's an official residence for the mayor in Chicago. I don't think there is, but
there may not be. You know, it's a very weird thing. I'm sort of using it in that song in the way that Simon uses Graceland, and that there's the word grace written into it, but it's sort of an arbitrary idea for trying to find grace, you know. So
sure. And it calls back to that whole class disparity thing going on.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So when I saw you play at Beat Kitchen, you were introducing Max's Kansas City, and you were making reference to Lou Reed. How does Lou Reed fit into what you're doing musically?
Well, I a lot of what was behind this album, I sort of, musically speaking, I sit in the chasm between what I would consider to be alternative music and mainstream music, right? And a part of the problem in sort of marketing my music has always been that it's awful. It's a little too indie for pop. It's a little too pop for indie. And on this record, I just decided to make peace with that and just play and sing at the top of my ability. In previous records, I had sort of been sort of acutely aware that I felt that my place was in alternative, sphere. I'm not a mainstream person, just personally speaking. It's not, the movies I like and the books I read. But as a musician, I'm pretty meticulous. So I sing pretty well. I play pretty well. And, everything can be a little bit pretty for, like the alternative scene. And I was thinking about Lou Reed a lot because I love Lou Reed and I don't think he would have liked me and what I was doing, and I sort of making peace with that on that song. Cause I was sort of talking about, going back through, I wrote that song on a European tour that was not going well. And I was beating myself up pretty bad about everything. And I just that song is just me taking an inventory of everything I'm upset about and trying to loosen my own self up. It's sort of a song to myself. And one of the things was just that I felt like I would never be, respected by these true eccentrics and alternative people. And I just sort of made my peace with that,
Yeah, fits there's a lot of characters making peace, and then maybe for good or for bad.
Exactly.
Over the course of the record.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's sometimes it's just time and age, but a lot of it had to do with I just was making a conscious decision to like, look, this is the best I can do, and if it's too pretty, like that's okay. If it's too well sung, if it's too that's a particularly catchy, fun song, And there's probably a time in my career not so long ago where I would have nixed it on account of its likability and placed something maybe more off-putting in favor of that. And I just don't have the fucking time to do that anymore. I got to put the thing that moves me out,
There you go. Thank you for not being off-putting deliberately.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, and I had times in my life where I was the opposite too, where I was like looking for, early on, and I think why I was sort of reacting to that early on. I wanted everyone to like me, and so I think the last few records, Selling Things and Loser on the Rope specifically, have elements of me sort of leaning into, and it's not insincere. Just where I was in my life at that time, which was I was more interested in analog synthesizers and maybe a little less linear melodies and maybe a little more atmospheric music. And I've sort of boiled it down to, okay, for better or worse, I love these things, and this is what I think sounds good on me. And when I sing at the top of my range, sounds good.
Has your writing evolved over time where you're less conscious of how it's received and you're more writing because you like it?
I suppose I'm always, I write for cathartic reasons, but I'm always aware of the listener. I'm always thinking of the listener, But my writing is sort of constantly evolving. Like it changes with every record, and I'm just trying to get it closer to my initial intention when I set out to start writing songs, which is to make something great. Great, capital G,
Right.
And But I am always aware of the listener, and I think that maybe some people aren't, and that's good for them. But I'm always going to be trying to please you because I really value the listener's time, and I really value their hard-earned money, and I don't think songs should necessarily just be here to tell you about me and my problems. I think that they should tell you about you and your problems. I think it's a public service. And when it was done to me, I was moved to my very core, and I am sort of eternally grateful that those people that were so deeply influential to me, they cared enough about me and my existence to tell me about me instead of just about them and their concerns. And so I'm just trying to pay that forward.
Nice. And would you say that your writing has gotten kind of more cinematic in a way with the character studies you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely more cinematic. I definitely think of things more in the sort of fiction sphere. Because I think you can tell a wider story. Early on I wrote a lot of like love, lorn, brokenhearted, 20-something songs. And at some point I realized I could just tell wider stories and bigger stories with, it took a while because it can be very corny, writing fiction at first. It can feel like, creative fiction at a community college kind of stuff, there's a touch to it where you need to have a certain amount of yourself in there for it to be recognizable. So all the characters are a little bit me on the record.
Sure. Is there an arc that you would say that the record lands at?
Yes, absolutely. I'm sort of the idea of the record is almost sort of, you can look at it like who gets to stay and who has to go, and who has to sell out and who has to move out. And the record sort of lands with a final song called Living It Backwards, which is a song where I sort of declare that either way, I am carrying on. Because the record sort of is sort of it's sort of an existential question of what the fuck are we gonna do now? Now that we're grown, now that our 20s are over, now that the clout that we were trying to build in these sort of Bushwick bars and with our PBRs is seemingly irrelevant. What are we gonna do? And my sort of landing point, and the only song I feel there's two songs on the record that I feel that I am the main character of, which is Living It Backwards and Some Room Left. And both of them are sort of songs about my own personal experience. But Living Backwards sort of lands at a sweet spot, which is, what do? We carry on.
Are you asking the listener to ask that of themselves as well?
Kind of, yeah. Where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we go.
Do you feel there's an optimism, or is it just completely ambiguous?
No, I think there's an inherent optimism. I read somewhere that all American novels should end with a happy ending because we've won all our wars, and I took that to heart. So yeah, that's a generally my records are pretty cynical, but the final song will usually be a nice little button. And yeah, Living It Backwards is an optimistic song in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really well crafted because these characters are going through some stuff for sure, but when the record's over, man, it's not a pit of despair. So I think you really pulled something special up here. So
thanks, man. I think I think ultimately what it is an album about reluctantly entering a different time in your life, right? The exit of one part of your life into another, a time where money didn't matter into a time where it does, a time where success didn't matter into a time where it does, a time where clout used to matter and now it doesn't, a time where your social sphere used to matter and now it doesn't. And what do we do now? Right. now that the bad guys won.
Right. Is there a round 2? Or round 16, whatever.
Well, there's always a round 2, man.
Yeah. So speaking of what do we do now, You're talking about Fantastic Cat has a record coming in maybe April. What are you doing between December and April? Are you thinking of or working on another solo record of your own?
There's going to be another. Yep, I will take that time to write. I love writing over the winter. I'm pretty pensive in the winter. And then there's going to be another solo tour that's going to launch probably in March, ahead of the record. And then it'll be, a lot of it, putting out records. It also has a lot of runway. There's a lot of music videos and stuff to prep. So that'll be kind of the gearing up. And then once we, the pulling back of the slingshot, and then once we let it go in April, it'll just be home free.
Okay. And then how is Fantastic Cat going to pretty much run through 2026?
Yeah, I think we'll do 26 and 27.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'll probably turn back around and make another record.
Will you? Is there a comfort to that kind of time frame film for you, or is that does that feel like pressure?
No, it never feels like pressure, man. I got to be honest. I for so much of my early career, getting my records funded and having people demand them of me was such an impossibility, that the fact that I have that now, that if I said, hey, I'm ready to make another record, that somebody would be like, great, we need that. Only encourages me to make more. Yeah, obviously there's a certain amount of pressure with everything, but no, I think that I think it's thrilling that people are interested in what I have to say right now, and I've got no shortage of things to say.
Excellent. So this is feeling like a good time to start wrapping up. If people want to find out more about you, Brian, where do you recommend people look?
You follow me on social media, on Instagram, Brian Dunne Music. My website has all my tour dates and everything you need to know, my bio and all that stuff. You just Google me, man.
You can be found.
I can be found.
All right. So thank you so much, Brian, for talking with me today. It's just been a real treat. The Clams Casino is a real work of art, and I am so glad to get the chance to talk to you about it.
Oh, well, thank you, Tom. That really means a lot to me, and thank you for having me.
You bet. All right. I will catch you on the road with Fantastic Cat at the very least.
Okay, see you later, man.
All right.